Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Yes, She Can project. I am thrilled to say that I'm joined today by the gorgeous Naomi. Hello, Naomi.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Yourself?
Yes, very good. Very good. Thanks.
Yes.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying yes. For anyone who doesn't know you, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, please?
Yes, so my name's Naomi Meller. I am the founder of the Skylark Collective and the International Women's Podcast Awards. Skylark is a global platform for women in podcasting. So anyone out there who identifies as women on a binary are really, really welcome at Skylark. We exist to connect, collaborate, and celebrate female podcasters, and the International Women's Podcast Awards, which is taking place in less than 2 weeks' time, which is very exciting. It's happening for the first time in London this year, and we are celebrating global talent in podcasting there. In my previous life, or in my current life still, I am a vet by training. So I have been a horse vet for 14 years. I still practice part-time and around about doing everything else. So yeah, that's my story, I guess. I have an absolute love of podcasting. I love mentoring and supporting other women. And yeah, just absolutely delighted to be with you today, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. So with you saying about that you're a vet as well, how scary was that to go from, because obviously you knew that you wanted to do podcasting anyway. Were you a vet full time and then you decided to kind of ease off the pedal on that for a little while whilst you got into podcasting? Was it hard to do such a massive leap from one to the other?
Well, actually, so yes, I was a vet full time for a long time. So for 11 years, I was full time with On Call, and sort of doing my internship, was doing kind of 80 hours a week, and just busy times. And you had to be working on call weekends and nights, and sort of I had times in my career where I wanted to work 21 days in a row before I had a day off or whatever, and it was full on at times, definitely. I'm very fortunate. I've lived abroad a couple of times as a vet. So I worked in the South Pacific for 6 months, and then I lived in Australia for a few years. So I sort of worked and traveled and had a really great time doing it. And then back in late 2017, early 2018, my husband got a new job and we had to relocate to a part of the UK where we didn't know anybody and I didn't have a job to go to.
Yeah.
And I was unemployed for a while. And by that time, I was quite specialist in my field and looking for a sort of quite particular job, I guess, that I couldn't really find.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting a part-time job and then was sort of freelancing as a vet in other practices, and just really a bit of a loose end in early 2018. I sort of thought that I was going to be a partner in a practice in a sort of very James Herriot-y style, I guess, seeing clients and running a business. And I'd always wanted to run my own business as well.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out for one reason or another. And so I ended up with this kind of part-time job and then doing bits and pieces of other things. And I just felt a little bit lost, Michelle, if I'm honest. I didn't really know where I was going with my career, and it was just a bit of a rubbish time.
And where you fitted in, kind of where your place was.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I basically decided instead just to kind of ease off the pedal on my professional career a little bit, because someone described it to me as kind of push and pull energy. And I felt like I'd been really pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing for a long time. And I just sort of hit a bit of a wall and I was a bit burned out and I was a bit just tired, really. Yeah. And so I decided at that point that I would set myself a couple of challenges in my personal life instead, and I would just let my professional life roll along. I had this part-time job and a few other gigs, and I was doing a bit of freelancing and locum work and whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought I've always loved listening to the radio, and I'd been hooked on podcasts for years. When you're a horse vet, you spend a lot of time in the car. And so I'd been listening to podcasts for 3 or 4 years already and just absolutely loved them and had loads of favorites. And I just thought, yeah, I'd like to give that a go, actually. One of the skills that I really learned as a vet is about having good communication skills. And I always say to people that when you're a vet or a doctor or a nurse or whatever, getting a good clinical history out of people is basically doing an interview.
Yeah,
You're digging into people's lives, into the life of their animal, what makes them tick, what's wrong with them, what are the back circumstances, all that kind of thing.
You're
So
asking the right questions.
yeah, and it's about really knowing how to ask those good questions. And so I decided then to look into starting a podcast, and I decided as well to run an ultra marathon at the same time. And
Brave.
I hadn't done either of those things before. I'd never run a marathon before, let alone anything else. But I invested in the help of a woman called Sarah Williams, who I would really credit on my path, and she knows that I'm eternally grateful to her. But she is the host and producer of a podcast called Tough Girl. And she's also an endurance athlete as well. She's done the Marathon des Sables and several other ultra marathons, big expeditions and things. And she's absolutely amazing. She's got a huge following for her podcast, and she is just an incredible person. And she really, really helped me in the early days. She taught me everything I needed to know about both running a long way and making a podcast. And
side by side.
She was like the perfect mentor for both of those things. And so, yeah, that was how I got started. So I launched.
How did you find her? Were you already friends with her, or did you have a chance meeting? Or
no, I'd come across her online, and then I just approached her. She does a bit of kind of coaching and mentoring anyway, and so I just approached her and said, would you help me for both these things? And she said yes. And I think it was probably just a case of like extreme luck that I found somebody in both the fields I was interested in doing at once. Because she taught me a lot about nutrition and kind of strength and conditioning training and all the real practical stuff about long distance running, as well as all the practical stuff about making a podcast. And then she did a lot with me about kind of personal growth. And I'd never really had any personal development training at all as a vet. And so just learning about, visualization and meditation and all those kinds of things that I just hadn't had any experience of before, and had previously thought probably a little bit woo-woo, if I'm honest. And so she was brilliant. And I launched my first podcast in July 2018, and I've subsequently gone on to produce, I'm just on my fourth one now. And so I've kind of built a little career, and I now do podcast kind of hosting and production as a side gig, amongst all the other things as well.
Gosh, you're a busy lady. How did you come up with the idea for the Skylark Collective, or was that something that was always there to begin with when you first started your podcast anyway? Or how did you know that you wanted to create such an amazing community?
So that's come gradually over a period of time, I guess. So my first podcast, Smashing the Ceiling, which is coming back for season 4 actually in next month, is stories of women with unusual and interesting careers. And that was born out of the fact that I'm really interested in the kind of career paths of other people, how they got where they are. And I really thought, actually, there's a lot of women out there with incredible jobs, women who are kind of smashing their own glass ceilings on a day-to-day basis. And I really wanted to kind of showcase those. And then subsequently at work, veterinary work, I've done quite a lot with students and new graduates, kind of mentoring people and helping them in their careers. And so I guess I'd kind of been that string to my bow for a little while. And then subsequently, I've been a part of quite a few women's networks. So just around sports and in my career, things in veterinary. And I just realized that there's a couple of really great big Facebook communities, for example, for women in podcasting, but they're based in the States. And there's nothing in Europe in terms of community for women and non-binary podcasters. So I just felt that there was a real gap in the market. Definitely. Over here, where podcasting is growing massively. There's loads of women podcasters in the UK and Europe as well,
especially since lockdown as well. I think a lot of people, that's the first time I really started to listen to podcasts anyway, was during lockdown. So I think it was a time for all of us where we were kind of just like grinded to a halt, and we didn't really have a lot else to do, did we? And that's when we could listen and really discover some amazing people and some amazing podcasts as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that has really been the case for a lot of people, because you know, particularly people living alone. I think one of the things that I often talk about and get feedback about podcasts is this kind of intimate listening experience, and often what you're providing is total companionship for people. And we know from the stats around podcasting that most people listen to podcasts alone, whether that's cooking or walking the dog or in the gym or driving the car or whatever. It tends to be quite a solo listening experience. And I think that kind of intimacy in the pandemic was really important and really special for a lot of people. And I think that explosion of podcasts, of people realizing that that was actually achievable for them as much as anything else. And obviously then in terms of listenerships has been brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. With you saying that I would imagine there is a big community over in the US, but I think sometimes, I don't know if you feel the same, but as a person in the UK, as much as you would enjoy joining a community in the US, it doesn't feel quite as accessible and doesn't feel quite as, I know it's not geographically close to home, but it's kind of different because I would say the cultures are so different anyway. But I think the fact that you're so far away from them, it's not like you could think, well, one day, you know, we could all sit in a room and have a coffee or something like that. So I think what you've done is really, really brilliant.
Yeah, and I think just from a practical perspective, some of the things that I wanted to attend were on at like 2 a.m. in the UK or whatever. And so I think there was that side of things as well. And, you know, I have to credit Jess and Elsie from She Podcasts, which is the biggest kind of women's and non-binary community of podcasters worldwide. They've got nearly 20,000 people in their Facebook group. And the two of them have been so supportive of the awards. They're just amazing people. And also Danielle Desir, who runs Women of Colour Podcasters, which again is a big international group. She's an incredible person, and actually reaching out to them with just talking about the awards, you know, they've been so collaborative and so brilliant. You know, so actually I would say that those people have really paved the way, and the reality is the States is quite a long way ahead of Europe as an industry in podcasting. You know, they've been going a lot longer. There's a lot more money sloshing about in the States. You know, things are bigger, everything's bigger, listenerships are bigger, networks are bigger, you know, everything is already a bit more commercial. Things are often run through production companies, and whilst there are a lot of indie podcasters in the States, I think where we are now in the UK is probably a little bit like the States was a couple of years ago. We're just that little bit behind them at the moment.
But you see, you could be driving that force forward, couldn't you? And you could be the one that drives the UK to kind of go behind the US, couldn't you? With what you're doing.
Definitely. Although one of the things that I really want to do is actually support independent podcasters as well, because I think actually it's really, that is just such an important part of the market, because podcasting started as a bedroom industry, you know, it really started as people making things in their bedroom. And then there was a kind of progression into studios, networks, professional sound, you know, that people like the BBC getting on board, you know, Netflix are into podcasts now. You've got Spotify, Amazon, these huge corporations. But actually when the pandemic came, suddenly everybody was back in their bedroom again. And that kind of democratization, I think is healthy. And, you know, it's one of the beauties of podcasting is that it's quite a low barrier to entry. Anybody
definitely
with a smartphone can make a podcast, and you can make a pretty good podcast with a smartphone, you know? So I think it's brilliant, and it's one of the things I love about it, and it's one of the reasons I think it's a brilliant resource to encourage women, especially young women, actually, to use their voice and to put their message out there, is because it is so accessible and so easy.
Yeah, definitely. And they've got, it's not like it's a situation where you want, some young girl wants a career maybe on television and how many barriers are in front of her to do that. But like you say, with podcasting, they've essentially got the tools at their fingertips, haven't they? And it's easy for anybody to do.
Definitely. And these, you know, there's over 2 million podcasts out there now. But when you contrast that with the fact that there are something like, I forget what the number is, but it's about 2 billion YouTube channels. You know, it's the numbers are so different, and blogs is like hundreds of millions. So, you know, those might not be quite accurate, so don't quote me on those. But it's definitely like, you know, really we're a cottage industry by comparison. And actually I think that's something that's easily forgotten, is that those kind of, that YouTube in particular, there's never going to be too many podcasts. And if you've got something really good to say and you can produce a really well edited, tight, good sounding podcast with interesting guests, there's no reason that you can't be a success, you know.
Exactly. And there's no reason why other people wouldn't want to listen, and not only listen, but really take something from it. I'm sure you've had exactly the same with yours, because of all the inspirational ladies that you've had on your podcast so far. But some of the like I had a message the other day, and it was from somebody that I knew, and they said that they'd listened to the Yes You Can project, and so many topics resonated with them, when normally they wouldn't listen. They perhaps wouldn't have listened to something like that had they have not known me, and I told them that that's what I was doing. So I think it's really important, like you say, for young girls to use their voice, for us to use our voices, and just to help people and quell that loneliness that people feel.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the other thing is that, you know, don't forget the variety that can come through podcasting, because, you know, a lot of podcasts are interviews like this, you know, some of the most popular podcasts in the UK and internationally are interview based, but there's some brilliant, you know, documentary podcasts out there. There's some brilliant comedy podcasts out there. And, you know, true crime is this huge genre in podcasting. And, you know, the first podcast that most people listen to, which was Serial, you know, which is still one of the most downloaded podcasts ever, was this kind of true crime podcast, and that kind of really kicked off the entire movement. And that was quite a long time ago now, but, you know, I think it still stands that there's such variety, and whatever you're interested in, there'll be a podcast on that.
Yeah,
there were some podcasts
so
on some really frigging niche things.
Yeah, definitely. And one of my favorites at the moment is they're shortlisted as well at the awards, is Who Shat on the Floor at My Wedding. Oh my, you wouldn't ever imagine that a podcast about that particular topic could be so incredible, but it's hilarious.
It's so good.
It really is good.
Yeah, that's a great podcast. And, you know, we had other things entered for the awards, and one of the other podcasts that's shortlisted is a historical podcast. And again, you know, like there's others that are just so, the variety of what we received as entries for the International Women's Podcast Awards was really quite startling and you know, wonderfully surprising. And just, you know, seeing all of those flood in, and there was, you know, we did have some slightly similar shows, but there were so many that were so different, and so many kind of unique, original ideas, and really unusual things, like, you know, two women in the States who absolutely love basketball, and they're one of the most successful kind of women's basketball commentary podcasts, which is super unusual in the sporting zone, because there's not many women-led podcasts on those kind of sports, you know. So it's just really interesting, and I just think there's room for everybody, you know. There's no point competing with it. You don't have to tread anyone else down for you to be a success, you know.
Absolutely. So with you saying that you offer, with the Skylark Collective, you offer one-to-one mentoring as well. So obviously you share your experience with other women. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm just about to implement that with members, and what they'll be getting is a 15-minute monthly accountability call. But one of the reasons I started the Skylark Collective in the first place was because of how many women were calling me up and saying, "Oh, I've heard you've got a podcast." And these were like friends of friends, quite loose contacts, you know, all these people who were like, "Can you teach me how to make a podcast? Or can I pick your brain about blah, blah, blah?" And I was like, yeah, fine. And I kind of worked out spending like hours chatting to people. And so I think there's probably 10 podcasts out there now where I've kind of mentored the people just getting through starting, in the same way that Sarah did for me. You know, really just chatting people through what the options are, you know, for simple things like tech and, you know, editing or whatever, but then also about planning and about honing your ideas. And then I think it's with our members, it's about accountability. So what's next for you? Where are you up to? How are you getting on? You
Mhm.
know, and really just helping them take that next step, which
Yeah.
for a lot of people, once they've established their podcast and they've established their listenership, is monetization. And I
Right.
think one of the common fallacies is, oh, I'll start a podcast and that can be my job. There are extraordinarily few people out there whose podcast makes enough money for that
Yeah.
to be a job. I mean, if
Mhm.
you're doing that, you're in like the top 0.5% of podcasters worldwide, you know. But that doesn't mean that your podcast can't earn enough to wash its face, as it were,
Yeah.
or, you know, cover your costs or whatever.
Mhm.
And so I think, you know, really helping people with that is a big point, and it's the thing that lots of people want help with.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of chatting about that, and then also just really kind of encouraging women to be doing more with their podcast. And
Okay.
I think for a lot of people, if you're a DIY podcaster, and I mean, you'll have some people who do everything themselves from start to
Mhm.
finish, and then some people will have an editor or a producer or both. And you know, often the limiting factor for DIYers in particular is time,
Yeah.
because I think, again, one of the big things that I tell people is doing a podcast takes a lot more time than you think it's going to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's not just, it's finding guests,
Mhm.
organizing recordings, editing, production, social media, any other
Yeah.
form of marketing that you're doing. You know, there's
Mhm.
all this stuff goes together, and it does take quite a bit of time,
It
depending on
does. You
how.
wouldn't think so, would you? You would just
No,
think, oh, I'm just going to have a conversation with somebody, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that gears up to that one conversation that you put out there.
definitely. And I think, you know, if the kind of rule of thumb that people quote is, if you're editing a podcast, that in the early stages, it's going to take you 4 times the length of your show. So
Yeah.
if your show's half an hour, you might spend 2 to 3 hours on the actual just editing process.
Yeah.
And actually that on a weekly basis, in addition to everything else, is
Mhm.
quite a lot, you know.
Yeah. Especially
So
if
I
you've
think,
got another job at the same time.
yeah, which most people do. You know, there's
Mhm.
an awful lot of people who start a podcast as a bit of a passion project or as a
Yeah.
side thing of their business. And, you know, I think one of the things that I often end up chatting to people about is how to incorporate their podcast into their business as part of their marketing arm. You know, because a lot of businesses now will actually view their podcast as part of their kind of overall business suite of offerings, I
Yeah.
suppose you'd call it,
Mhm.
if their podcast is related to their business.
Yeah.
And for some people it's not. You know, like, my first podcast is a total passion project,
Yeah.
and that has never been a part of my business, and it probably won't. You know, it is on the Skylark website, but
Yeah.
it's kind of, you know, it's not meant to be an arm of my
Yeah.
business. So yeah, those sorts of things really. And I just love really encouraging women in the early stages. I think most of the mentoring that I do is really helping people to get started, and I think
Yeah.
actually just getting going is the first step.
Mhm. I think a lot of how you were saying, the lady that helped you in the beginning, um, with the different arms of like the fitness training, the marathon training, and the podcasting. I think maybe the mental side as well is a massive issue, as in perhaps maybe someone coming to you as a mentor, a lot of the time, not only are they after practical advice, they're after kind of confidence advice as well, to kind of
Hmm.
believe
Hmm.
that they can do it.
Mm.
So that's the biggest
Mm.
stumbling block, isn't it? To
Yeah,
think,
and a lot of it in the beginning is about that confidence and about the planning aspect of things. And I think, as a mentor, the way I would view my role is basically to help people make something that shows the best of them and the
yeah,
best of what they're capable of. And,
yeah,
you know, if you have no interest in, I don't know, snakes and ladders, you're probably not going to make a podcast about board games, you know, whatever.
yeah,
But you want to do something that you're passionate about, which you're really is going to carry through. Because I think the best podcasts, and I think the other thing is about achieving longevity, because the
yeah,
best podcasts are ones that go consistently for a while and that
yeah.
listeners know what they're going to get. But
Mhm.
it's remarkable how many podcasts don't survive beyond year one.
Right.
So many. About
Mhm.
three quarters of podcasts don't go beyond their first year.
And what do you think the
And
reason for that is, that the underpin for that?
I think some people, I think it's multifaceted, but
Yeah.
I think probably some of it would be time, I think, is a big one. I think some people expect a lot more success than they might get in the early stages, because unless you already have a pre-existing large audience for other reasons, like a social media following, or you've got a business presence, whatever, building an audience takes time, and quite a lot of time. I think some people run out of ideas and or guests, and I think some people may well just actually produce a podcast series that is discrete, as in they make 10 episodes of something and that is that, and it's never meant to be anything. So things like, you'll see that commonly with book launches now. So someone like Dolly Alderton, for example, she was on the high low with Pandora Sykes, and when she had a book come out a couple of years ago, which was called Everything I Know About Love, she produced an absolutely phenomenal podcast series called Love Stories, which was one of my favorite podcasts. But it came and went because it was there for a particular purpose, for a particular time. I was devastated that that podcast didn't continue, because I loved it. But it served its purpose for her, and it coincides with something else. And you'll see that really quite commonly now with good authors that will be putting out a podcast series. If they've got podcasting experience, they'll be putting out a podcast series with their book as well.
You see, now that you said that, it makes you look out for it. Honestly, all of the information that you're saying, it's like I've never really thought about before. I mean, even the monetization thing, I'd never even thought as far as monetization, because I think the reason that a lot of people start it, like myself, is just because I love sharing other people's stories. And I love hearing from other people. I wouldn't have even thought that you could make money out of a podcast anyway.
There are some people making some very big money out of podcasts, Michelle. There's lots of ways of monetizing a podcast, but some of the biggest shows, even over here, will be taking $5,000 plus per episode. And those people with very big, very, very big audience. So but it's, when you think about it like that, it can be, there's some serious money tootling around, and a lot of people won't be anywhere near that ever, but that doesn't mean that you can't be having partnerships with companies that might be aligned with your message or your podcast, or you can be doing other forms of advertising, your listeners can be contributing, there's so many different ways you can monetize a podcast. But I think if you're starting for the right reasons, you tend to be starting it without money in mind.
Definitely.
Unless you're under the auspices of some form of production house or whatever. I think most people begin because they want to tell a story, or they want to talk about something that they're really passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. So do you start, are people welcoming the Skylark Collective that don't have their own podcast yet, but they're just like dipping their toe in the water and they want to find out more and they've just got an idea?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So we have quite a lot of skill sessions as well. So so part of the membership is we have monthly membership meetups as well. So there's kind of opportunities for networking with other people, which is great for kind of sharing expertise. And definitely, we love to meet new podcasters as well. And we've currently got a founder member offer, which is still on, which is £100 for the first year, which is about £8 a month. And so that basically is the kind of starting point for people if they want to come into the collective and they just want to find out more about it. But I feel like when you're doing stuff, I put a lot of stuff out there for nothing. And I really, I have a lot of calls with people because I just love helping people.
Yeah, you can tell that.
I kind of often get people ring up and be like, can I just have 5 minutes of your time? And I'm like, yeah, fine.
And then it turns into 5 hours.
But it's great. And actually, I do really just enjoy that. So I love taking Instagram lives, and I often do Instagram lives with other podcasters to help promote their series or their work. And definitely anybody who is thinking about starting a podcast, just get in touch, and I'm more than happy to help you in their first instance, for sure.
Wow. Yeah. And anyone who's listening, you're definitely going to the right place. Naomi knows everything.
I do not know everything.
You do.
One thing I would say is that I am not trained in any form of like audio engineering or professional production and all that kind of thing. So I think the one thing I would say is that I've learned everything from the ground up. You know, I work with there's a girl called Rebecca Pennington who does lots of work with me. She runs a company called Ocean Audio Productions. Bex has got a background in radio. She's been on the breakfast show on Capital, and she's worked in global radio, and she's an incredible like professional producer. And there's lots of other people who I know and work with who are really, really kind of professional audio backgrounds. And I think those people do incredible work. But I think if you want to learn from the ground up, what I am an example of is the fact that you can do it when you have no knowledge, and you can do it when you have very little equipment either. I started my first podcast with a laptop and a pair of like iPhone headphones. And yes, I've invested in a bit more stuff these days, but you don't have to bank, and you do not have to have any kind of prior experience in order to make something that sounds really pretty good. You know, there's lots of people out there who do have incredible kind of studio style setups and have got lots of expensive technology, and that will give you the crispest, most beautiful sound. But there's no reason that you can't make a good podcast with something that's really quite basic and very inexpensive.
It's inspirational, to be honest with you. You're an inspiration to so many of us that are just starting out in podcasting, and to see that you can be at the level that you're at whilst teaching yourself is just amazing. So it really is, yes, she can. Yes, Naomi can.
YouTube is a wonderful thing, Michelle.
Isn't it?
I learned how to fix my cooker off there. I mean, you can literally learn anything off YouTube. So yeah, no, well, thank you. That's extremely kind of you. Thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that.
That's very true.
It feels a bit embarrassing to hear that, but it's very kind of you. So thank you.
It's the way that you talk about other people, and you say they're so professional and they've had all of this training. You are just as professional because you have taught yourself, and you are producing the same quality of work as other people. But just because you've taught yourself, it doesn't make you any less professional. So I think you're doing yourself an injustice by not talking about yourself in the same way.
Well, I'm very open about how many screw ups I make as well. You know, I've had instances where I've been in interviews and halfway through and these were like paid gigs that were paid by clients, where I've suddenly gone, oh my God, I've not pressed the record button. Or whatever, you know, that's happened to me once, where after about 20 minutes I suddenly realized I hadn't recorded anything, and I'm
panicking now, let me just check.
No, you're all good, you're all good. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I would to say it happens to everybody. Like you lose audio, it disappears, you make some kind of cock up, it happens. And I just think you just have to be open about that to people, because I think everybody, you know, my kind of favorite thing is the analogy of being a duck, where you look like you glide along the surface, but you are paddling furiously underneath. And I love ducks, and I kind of talk about that a lot, because that is a strong representation of my life. And I just feel like it's better to be honest about these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talking of ducks and the paddling furiously, you obviously, on the outside, these awards look incredible. You look super organized. How scary is it to have put together all of this for the
very scary. I'll just be very honest, it's very scary. It's a bit like organizing a birthday party and not knowing if anyone's going to turn up, although fortuitously we have sold a lot of tickets, so I'm really grateful for that. We're nearly sold out, which is amazing. Yes, when I first had this idea for the International Women's Podcast Awards, it was not going to be called the International Women's Podcast Awards to begin with. The initial working title was the Skylark Awards, because obviously it was coming from the Skylark Collective. And then somebody very wise said to me, nobody's going to know what that's about. And I was like, yes, that's true. And so then they said, are you having any entries from abroad? And I was like, yeah, I should think so. So like, right, well, let's call it. Why don't you call it the International Women's Podcast Awards? Which is what it's now become. And I've been very, very fortunate as somebody who did not have a lot of connections within the industry. I would be really open to say, like, I'm a vet. That's my job. Is my job. And, you know, I'm not someone who's from a professional podcasting background. I have just reached out to people, and I have been networking like fury during the pandemic. And basically I have been having coffees and meetings with as many people as I could find. And what I would say is the podcasting family is wonderful. And people are really receptive, really open. And there's been lots and lots of people I've spoken to, some of whom are big companies who've come on board for sponsorship, and lots of people who've been incredibly supportive of this idea, when really I had absolutely nothing to show that I was going to be a credible person, other than the persona of me that they saw in meetings. And I think that's a real testament to the podcast industry and the podcast family as a kind of wider entity, that people have been willing to take a chance on me on the first time that this is happening. And you know, we've got a brilliant event coming, and I have every confidence that this is going to be absolutely fabulous and just the start of something really, really good.
You see you're doing it again to yourself. You're saying you're pleased that they took a chance on you, but you should be thinking you made such a good impression that they want to be involved. That's the truth.
Well, that's yeah, I mean, that is probably true. And but it's so it is scary. I think doing anything new is scary. And I mean, one of the things that I guess has been another theme of my life is I tend to jump in with both feet fairly blindly. So I'm
sometimes that's a good thing.
And I'm not someone I'm not scared of risk, and I'm not scared of change. And those are two things that I think have sat well in my corner. You know, I think I mentioned before that I'd had experiences of living abroad, and both times I moved abroad, I went on my own, and I didn't know anybody in the places I was moving to.
Wow.
And I think those kinds of experiences when I was in my early 20s were very formative for me in terms of putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I'm quite comfortable doing things that are new, different. And I'm confident enough in my own ability to learn new things and make things happen that I am quite prepared to take on that sort of stuff. And that hasn't always been the way, but I definitely think that I have now reached the age of 37 and I know what my skills are. So, and organization fortuitously is one of them. So you know, I know that I can organize a good event because I have done it before. And I think those sorts of things just make me just sort of know that everything's going to be fine. My philosophy of life is it'll be fine because it has to be. So
I love that philosophy. I'll keep on being a duck. It'll be fine.
Just keep paddling, everything will be fine. And that is just the way things are working out. So
good. I bet you're not going to have much chance though, with you being the organizer. I hope that you get a chance to enjoy the night.
I'm sure I will. I mean, I remember somebody saying to me before I got married, just to every now and again just stop and have a look around. And I did that on my wedding day before I got drunk, and and just really enjoyed the time. And you know, looking around at all those people that were there and people that I loved and people who'd come to support us was really special. And I definitely plan to do that at Albright. You know, we're really lucky that we've had a lot of support from Albright, and they're an amazing organization in their own right, doing brilliant things for women in business. And we're really privileged to be holding the event there. So I think I am looking forward to just taking it all in as well. So.
Before you get drunk.
Not that night. No. This is a professional event. I will be very professional.
Have you had a chance to sit down and kind of, I would imagine the last few months have been so hectic for you. Have you actually had a chance to sit down, take a step back and think, wow, look at what I've achieved in such a short space of time?
Yes, I have actually. And the reason I do that is, so another person who's been very influential in the formation of the Skylark Collective and subsequently the awards is a woman called Poppy Delbridge, who runs the House of Possibility, she's a coach. She is just an incredible woman. And I joined at the start of the pandemic. I put a bit of money out and I went into a coaching hub with Poppy, which was again something I'd never done before. And so for 12 months, I was in a weekly coaching program with just a phenomenal bunch of women, a lot of whom are coming to the awards actually, all different businesses, different interests, quite a lot of very creative people,
Yeah.
and people who have just become very, very important in my life. And
Yeah.
Poppy has definitely been one of those people. And that has been a real eye opener in terms of reflecting back on where you've come from. And when I look
Yeah.
at where I was 18 months ago at the start of the pandemic, I was furloughed. I had a lot of time on my hands. The Skylark Collective and the awards weren't even a kernel of an idea at that point. And I
Wow.
think just that 12 months between June 2020 and June 2021 has just been extremely formative for my business and my
Yeah.
career. And those women in particular have been absolutely incredible supporting me
Yeah.
through that transition. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, I would not be where I am now without the support of those people on a weekly basis. Because I
Oh.
think when you're launching a new business, particularly as a first-time entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
having those kind of people around you is just utterly invaluable.
Yeah.
And those women have really supported me. A lot of them were starting businesses or really developing businesses during the pandemic as well. And actually that
Wow.
was none of them in exactly the same field as me, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, really, really fantastic women who have been just brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant to have by my side as that's all gone on.
Wow. So you've got an incredible network around you, almost like a
Yeah,
buoyancy device, isn't it? Knowing
definitely. And
that you're going to be
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Poppy herself has just taught so much to me about, she has a background in television, so a lot about pitching, about PR, about the
Yeah.
media, and as well as all the kind of personal development stuff as
Mm-hmm.
well. You know, she's just an absolute powerhouse. If anybody is looking for a career coach, I couldn't recommend her more highly. And she has just really, really helped me launch and then subsequently grow this business and make it what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think having people around you, and it's one of the things that I want to really foster at the Skylark Collective, is this
Yeah.
sense of like genuine
Support.
community. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think someone said to me recently with you know, there's a lot of membership communities out there now, and I
Yeah,
think
there
people
is.
said, someone said to me, you come for the content, but you stay for the community.
Yeah, that's
And
so right.
I think that is really right, because
Mhm.
actually the reality is you want to work with people you like. And
Yeah.
if you meet people that you like, who are like-minded, who have the same ethos as you're going to
Hmm.
want to hang out with them, and you're going to want to spend time with them, whether professionally or
Absolutely.
personally.
Yeah,
So I think that's
absolutely.
really important.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say has been the most challenging so far as regards to the awards and the Skylark Collective in particular?
Um, I'll give you another very honest answer. Not flapping about money is a big one.
Okay.
I think when anybody's launching a business, I've bootstrapped this business entirely myself. And, you know, I've put in hours doing locum shifts in order to earn the money that I've needed to get the business going.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if you wake up in the night and you think, oh my God, where is this all going to come from? How am I going to
Yeah.
pull this together? That's a stress, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the reality is there's a lot of first time businesses that do fail.
Yeah.
And I think while I have every confidence that as I said, this is going to be fine,
Yeah.
there definitely have been doubtful moments.
Hmm.
And I think that money mindset is something that I've worked on a lot in the last 12
Okay.
months. I think I've had a lot of very useful help and advice on that.
Yeah.
But I think whilst I am very prepared to take risks in general, I'm somebody who has previously been quite risk averse with money. And
Okay.
so actually giving myself the permission to step out of my comfort zone with that has been a challenge,
Yeah.
definitely. I guess the second thing is just knowing the order in which to do things with regard to running a big event.
Yeah.
I've again had some help from a wonderful woman called Sarah Ty, who is going to be present at the awards. She is sponsoring a category as well. And she has been amazing at being a kind of PR consultant. She's run big awards shows before, and again, has
Okay.
been my absolute right hand with this. I couldn't have done this
Yeah.
without her either. And I think I made a lot of mistakes. There are things I didn't do as early as I should have done. I'm
Okay.
still got things on my agenda that probably should have been done by now, you know, and had
But
I
it's
known
fine.
all of
We're
that,
docs.
I'd have been much more organized. But I think Yeah, exactly. It's fine. It's going to be fine. And it will. It's just, I guess, making sure that everything is done in plenty of time. And I think having Sarah on board for that has been amazing. And then I guess, yeah, just having enough time to do everything. I think as an entrepreneur, you hear a lot of people saying it's very difficult to create space between work and play. And I think you'll know this yourself, Michelle. It's really tempting to open your laptop on weekends and just think, oh, I'll just do a few emails, or
oh my God, I do that all the time. My husband has to say to me, right, will you put your bloody phone down now, even if it's like 10 to 12? And I'm like, yeah, but if I don't send this, then I've got to do this. And that. It's hard. Even in the middle of the night, you wake up thinking, oh, that's a good idea for a new product. Let's make that one. Or, oh my God, I've got to send this email. It's time consuming and all consuming in your brain, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah. And I definitely, one thing I would say is, we very much prioritize sleep in our household. I'm really lucky. We go to bed very early, but we get up very early. My husband is often up very early for work, but I need a lot of sleep. If I don't get sleep, I am absolutely no use and I am grumpy. And so I know that, and I never compromise on that. And it's the one thing I would say is that basically I might start my laptop at 6 in the morning, half 6 in the morning, because I find that's my productive time. I quite often get up and I will bang out a couple of hours at my laptop before I go to work or whatever. But often I don't really work past 6-7 p.m. ever, because I know that I'm just not productive. I'm tired. I just know that I'm going to be unproductive at that time. And so I'd actually rather put it away and come back to it the following day. And I think that's something as a challenge. It's just about kind of creating that mentality of, no, that's enough for today.
I think that's really important. It's really, really good advice, and really important to recognize that within yourself as well, isn't it? Because it's so hard when you're in that cycle of everything's getting on top of you and you've got this, that and the other to do. I think it's very hard to take a step back and realize, well, actually, am I actually doing myself any favors by continuing the way that I'm going?
Yeah. And I think it's common for business people to have this sort of quite masculine ethos, I think, of, you've got to be working really hard in order to make your business succeed. And, don't get me wrong, I do work hard, but I have plenty of time to relax. And I always make sure I have one day a week, or try to, where I don't do anything work-wise. So I am quite happy to work 6 days a week. But I will always make sure I have a day of rest. And I make sure that, I try and exercise and try and eat well. As I said, I always prioritize sleep and try and, I think it's just about trying to keep that balance, because I think if you just go at 1,000 miles an hour and you don't give yourself that, and you go to bed at 2 a.m. and you're up at 6, whatever, you're only going to burn out and you won't be a success. And so I just feel, actually remembering that there's no such thing as an overnight success. Business is, I'm in it for the long haul. And actually,
and you can afford to space it out then, can't you? If you've got that mentality, rather than thinking everything needs to be done right now, because it doesn't.
No. And I think, I don't know whether you agree with this, Michelle, but I feel like we live in an age where everybody wants everything now.
Yes,
and actually,
absolutely.
Life's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? And I kind of feel that actually, when I start to view it that way, and I just release the pressure a little bit off myself, it's just much easier.
It brings reality a bit back, doesn't it, really, when you say things like that? Because then it can it'll change your mindset into thinking, well, actually, can this wait till tomorrow? Or can this actually wait till next week? Can I make a good plan to actually spread things out a little bit more, so I'm not spreading myself out too thinly?
And I would say that, for anyone, when I said earlier on that organization is one of my skills, I actually don't consider myself to be a very organized person, funnily enough. No. And I'm not very good at, detailed planning, for example. Right. I'm definitely I'm not a details person. I'm definitely a sort of, I have a bigger picture or a bigger vision in my head of how it's going to be. And then I'll kind of work the details out as I go along. I'm not one of those people that has, you know, great big charts of sort of what you have to have done by certain
Yeah.
dates. And I kind of wish I was, and maybe I will be. And, you know, one of the girls that works for me loves a Trello board, for example. And that just doesn't really come on my radar, you know.
No,
and
not the way you
actually
work.
no, I sort of wish I was, but I would sort of encourage anyone who's like, oh God, I'm not very organized. Well, don't worry, like neither am I. I'm really
Yeah, I'm
disorganized.
not organized at all. You see these
No.
people and they've got like, have you done your planner for this week, or have you planned your diary this month? What do you want to achieve this month? And I'm like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, completely. And I have to say, the other thing I've recognized is I know what I don't like to do and what my strengths are not. I've got a really good accountant, and I've got someone helping me out with social media. I've got a brilliant person, because that is one thing I do not like. I don't enjoy doing it. I don't enjoy planning it. If it was up to me, nothing would ever go out, and my Instagram just looks like chaos. And so actually, I think, you know, recognizing what your strengths and weaknesses are is really important. And the other thing that I would say, I used to be really bad at accepting help. I'd be like, no, it's fine, I can do it. Like, I'll just deal with it myself. Now when people say, can I help you? I'm like, yes, you can. Let me give you a job. So anyone now who says, can I help you? I'm like, don't do that. So I think the other thing is kind of accepting help from people. Often it's so well meant. And, you know, I've had so much support from people close to me and people not that close to me who have just been amazing at helping to develop this and get this idea off the ground. So that would be my other tip, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, especially because sometimes it can feel like such a barrier, can't it? It can feel like, oh, if I accept help, then that means that I'm not doing a good enough job myself. And then that kind of starts the cycle of, oh, does that mean I'm not capable? Does that mean I can't do that? And then it kind of spirals downwards, doesn't it? It's hard.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
So on the flip side, what has been your highlight so far?
I think my highlight will be when the 23rd of September comes and is a major success and then goes. No, my highlight
come
so
up
far,
to you and I'm going to say, Naomi is now your highlight. Like,
exactly.
Yes.
As you give me a glass of champagne. No, my highlight so far, I think, has probably been, you know, just securing. We've had some amazing sponsors come on board and just big companies, and I think having the realization that people believe in this as an idea, I think has been a real highlight. Whoever that is, I think just having other people say, yes, this sounds great. Yes, I'm on board. You know, having Vic Hope there, from many of you will know from BBC Radio 1, she was on Strictly a few years ago. Like, Vic is all over the place. She's been presenting the Paralympics recently. And so, you know, just having her come and present the evening is going to be amazing. And I think just all those bits and pieces together has been great. And then I think, like you said, Michelle, when you get feedback from the podcast, just getting feedback from people who say, I really like what you're doing, or having feedback from women I've helped. And like when I said, I've had calls with people and people just saying, oh my God, this is amazing, thank you. That's actually just a highlight for me. I just also love meeting new people. One of my absolute passions in life is meeting new people. And the number of people who I have met virtually through anything to do with podcasting in the last 18 months who have now become friends is really amazing. I've got some really fab new friends. And actually, I think when you're an adult, you don't make that many new friends anymore.
No, you don't.
It's not
but
like
the ones that you do make, you hold dear, don't you? Because they've come, it's not like when you're at school, like who's friends with who, or oh, I really like this person and we like play a game or something. When you're an adult, when you get a friend and you totally get each other, it's different.
Definitely. And I've, you know, some of the people I've met, I would now consider to be really good friends, and that has been really special. I think that's probably been a big highlight as well, is just having this band of women podcasters and other women in the podcasting industry around me who have been just truly phenomenal. And there's been certain people who I haven't yet met in real life, but having phone calls with, and I think, God, I feel like I've known you for years, you know. And that's so special, and that actually has been a real highlight for me as well.
That's so nice. What would you say your goals and aspirations for the Skylark Collective for the future are?
just really want to grow the membership. And
Yeah.
so one of the other things I've got coming up, which is going to be kicking off after the awards, is to build a bursary fund
Okay.
for young women aged 16 to 24 who've got an idea for a podcast that they want to pitch and take through to production. There's quite a few. There's a few programs out there. So the BBC have an incubator, Spotify have one, Amazon have a program as well, but none of them are targeted just at women, and particularly not just at young women. And I'm really interested in that demographic of Gen Z, because I think they are very video focused, actually.
Yeah.
There's obviously TikTok is huge, YouTube is huge, but I think we haven't really tapped into the skill and the talent of that generation in the podcasting world yet.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of really young women out there who've got big ideas and lots of things to say. And I'm really looking forward to engaging with that demographic in particular, to encourage them into podcasting. So we're looking to, I've got a production company lined up and some other supporters who are going to help with that. So I'm looking forward to kind of starting to kick that off. Really, I've got to develop the application and getting that open, but that's my next project after the awards. So that's what's coming up next. And otherwise, just growing the membership. Just really want to be providing for the members, really. Whenever you do anything with a membership, it's all about giving the best you can. And I think actually just really keeping talking to them about what they want to hear about, education stuff and skills development and all that kind of thing, and then just really growing that community and really growing that ethos of support, I think is really important to me, Michelle.
Wow. Oh, it's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you, Naomi. Just before we go, could you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. So we are at the Skylark Collective on Instagram, and we are at IW Podcast Awards on Twitter. The website is skylarkcollective.co.uk, and you can find absolutely everything on there, including one of my podcasts as well. And that'll be everything you need. And if anybody is interested in podcasting, reach out to me however you like. My email is on the website, or you can just slide into the DMs or whatever you want. I try and reply to absolutely everybody.
Hey, you're just great, aren't you?
It's very sweet of you to say, Michelle. Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And yes, thank you so much for coming on. And I shall see you a week on Thursday. Woo-hoo.
Yes, it's very exciting. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, Michelle.
Oh, you too. Thank you.
Thanks.